These are the photosynthesis notes. These notes will come in two parts, photosynthesis and cellular respiration. These are the notes we're going to be going over next week, so please make sure you complete your stapled handout to fill in the blanks, and Richard, come with them when we go over them. So it says, today we'll be going over photosynthesis and cellular respiration. It says, no, you may not be excused. You're not leaving this dinner table until you're finished photosynthesizing. Mom. Obviously, the plant is going to eat or make their own food, right? As a child would be eating. And sometimes we refuse to complete our food or our meal. And so obviously has taken place. The learner, which is you, will compare the reactants and products of photosynthesis and cellular respiration in terms of energy and matter. So remind me, what are reactants? Remember? Write it down. It's what you start with in the beginning. And what are products? It's what you end with in an equation. So, in photosynthesis, we start with oxygen. What do plants need? Carbon dioxide, right? What else do they need? Light, right? What else do they need? Glucose? No, they make that. So they start with carbon dioxide, light, and water. And what do they end with? They make oxygen and glucose. And we're going to be talking about this today. So remember, autotrophs can make their own food using energy from sunlight. Green plants and a few bacteria do this. Some protists as well. So I'm going to go ahead and add protists. And I'm also going to go ahead and add up here that auto means, what is auto? Self, automático, right? Yo mismo, yo solo, so self. And troph is food or energy. So to make your own food using sun energy. Do we do this? No. Things called producers. They do this. So how did this start? How do we know this, right? Research into photosynthesis began centuries ago with this simple question. So a long time ago, when a tiny seed grows into a huge plant, where does all the new plant come from? Where does all this growth comes from, right? So some scientist or some person just like you had this idea. What's going on when this happens? How does this happen? An observation, right? Isn't that what I told you want to do first? Or you want to make an observation about things that you like? Well, this person probably likes the outside. So I'm going to put here observation. That's how experiments start. So, in 1643, a Belgian physician, John van Helmont, determined the mass of a pot of dry soil and the small seedling. Now, what does that mean, mass? You probably heard of it. To take up space is matter. And so the mass of an object is how much does it weigh? Weight, right? So he planted the seedling in the pot and watered it regularly. So he waited, he planted it. At the end of 5 years, the seedling had gained about 75 kilograms, but the mass of the soil was almost unchanged. What? Only the plant grew, not the soil. He decided the increase in plant had to come from the water. That was the only thing he had added. So, did the increase in weight happen because of the soil? No, because the soil was unchanged. It had to have happened because of the plant and what else? The water. He only added water to it, right? All right. We now know why plants grow or what makes plants grow. Water is one of the things. So this man discovered that plants need water. Van Helmont didn't realize the major contribution to the mass of his tree was also something he couldn't see: carbon dioxide from the air. Plants use water and carbon dioxide to make carbohydrates. Why do you think it's called carbohydrates? And tell me again, what are carbohydrates? This is the wall to make, is made by what brick? Yeah, sugar, saccharides, right? There you go. So plants need carbon dioxide and water. But he wasn't sure about the carbon dioxide yet. For sure, he knew the water. Let's find out how they discovered it was also carbon dioxide. In 1771, an English minister, Joseph Priestley, discovered that a flame burning in a closed jar would die out. So the first one was in 1643. And then 1771, that's almost like 100 years later. So he discovered that a flame burning in a closed jar would die out. What happens? What does this flame need? Do you know? It needs oxygen. Why do people sometimes blow at the fire, right? Because they're giving it oxygen. Too much can blow it out, but too little will make it turn off. So if you cover a light, it will turn off. If he placed a live plant in the jar and allowed a few days to pass, the candle could be lit again. So here's the plant, and the plant is with the candle. Remember, the candle just turned off. That's what happened. So then how is it that he's not going to open up that vacuum? That's called a vacuum, by the way, where the plant and the candle are in. There's nothing going in or out of there except whatever the plant brings and the candle brings, right? So he used this glass to make the light turn on. You ever do that? Please don't do that to ants. But you know, like you use the sun rays, right? The sunlight to burn things maybe sometimes with the mirror or a glass. Well, that's what he did to turn on the light. And how is it that the light was able to turn on? What was in there that wasn't in there before? It wasn't up here, but it was down here. What did the plant give that candle? The plant produced something required for burning that the candle used up. We now know it was oxygen. So it uses water and carbon dioxide and it makes oxygen. In 1779, so a few years later, Dutch scientist John Eganhaus showed Priestley's plant experiment only worked if the plant was exposed to light. Now we know. That's why it's called photosynthesis, guys, because we know that it needs the sun. But did you know that someone had to actually make these experiments so that we can know that this is called photosynthesis? So here, there is no light. He did the same experiment twice, one in the light, one without light. He tried turning on this candle in the light. So he probably put it with the light and then, in the light and then try to turn it on because he needs the sun's rays, right? Or some kind of light rays. And it wouldn't turn on. Why? Because no oxygen was being produced. Why? Because the plant needs the sun to make oxygen. And we're going to do an experiment with this, hopefully tomorrow, where you're going to see that the plant needs light energy to make oxygen. I'll tell you how tomorrow. In 1961, oh my goodness, 1779 to 1961, that's like 200 years later, American chemist Melvin Calvin received the Nobel Prize for figuring out the chemical pathway used by plants to make sugar. So we discovered that, well, not us, right, but scientists discovered that plants needed water, needed carbon dioxide, needed the light, and made oxygen, and glucose. And in this experiment here by Melvin Kelvin, called the Kelvin cycle, right? That's what it's called, his last name. And you see it there inside the circle. He discovered that the plant uses energy from the water, the electrons, and uses energy from the light and produces this glucose. Let's see the equation. These experiments led to work by later scientists who finally discovered that in the presence of light, plants transform carbon dioxide and water into carbohydrates and release oxygen. So we start with, what is that again? We start with, what is that called? Make sure you remember. Reactants, right? And what do we make? What do we synthesize? Guys, by the way, synthesis, if I haven't said it, I'm sorry, is to make. Synthesis, to make. Photosynthesis, we make sugar with light energy, right? So, we synthesize the products. What we end with. So, carbon dioxide and water, this is what plants need, and light energy produce sugar and oxygen. And you need to know the English, and you need to know the numbers and letters. The formula. So 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O plus light energy equals or produces C6H12O6 and 6O2. Now just remember, think about it. Don't look at it, right? But think about it. What do plants need? What do they need? They need carbon dioxide and water and light energy, right? What do they make? Chocolate, right? Chocolate. No, they don't just make chocolate, guys. They make sugar, right? Azúcar. Glucose. This is glucose. That's glucose. How do I know it's glucose? Well, chocolate is like glucose, isn't it? And so is CHO, like it starts with chocolate. It's just a way for you to remember that sugar is C6H12O6. And then also they make oxygen for us, remember? That's what we breathe in. A lot of you seem to get this confused. That plants use that and they make this. I don't know why, but you need to know that we breathe in oxygen. We don't breathe in carbon dioxide. We would die of poison, okay? So remember that. Remember what plants use and what they make, and remember that scary but interesting number. Which one? 6, 6, 6, 12, 6, 6. I think you can remember that. Here we go. So, photosynthesis overview. Again, sunlight, that's light energy. Carbon dioxide and water. This is what they use. These are the reactants, right? And they make oxygen and glucose, right? But where do they do this? How do they do this? They're green, right? What's going on? This. Photosynthetic sugar fairies, glucose synthesizers of the cell. So they look like little frijolitos, okay? They're not really fairies. They're called chloroplast. What are they called? Say it, please. Chloroplast. Chloro means green, right? So, photosynthesis, performed in the chloroplast of plants. Carbon dioxide, water, and light energy are used. You already know this. Glucose, sugar, and oxygen are produced. Now, what I need you to know is I need you to look inside the green part, right? Look at those coin-looking things. They look like little coins stacked up together, pancakes, right? Well, those coin-looking things are called thylakoids. What are those coin-looking things called? Thylakoids. And that's where the light is going to hit. I'll explain that a little later. When these thylakoids are in a stack, they're called grana. So there's the next picture. Do you see where it says granum on the right? It's the entire stack of the pancake or of the coins. granum, or if there are more than one, grana. The grana, or the granum if it's only one stack, okay? And what is a stack of? What are the coin-looking things? Thylakoids. All right. So there's also a space in there with gel-filled chloroplast surrounding thylakoid sac, right? That's called the stroma. The stroma. Make sure you know that. And then on the outside of the cell, because this is inside the cell, this is a little organ, organelito chiquito inside the cell. The cytoplasm is a gel-filled space outside the chloroplast, inside the cell. Remember, the cell does not have air inside where these little organs move. The cell has gel-like, jelly, right? And they're moving in there. Well, in the chloroplast, you also have this a gel-like form called stroma. Now, why is that important? Because, again, what do plants need? Carbon dioxide plus water plus sunlight absorbed by chlorophyll. So that's what is why we need the light, and that's why we need the thylakoids. I'll explain it in a bit. Glucose plus oxygen is what they make. And remember that scary but interesting number, 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O plus light energy equals or produces chocolate, right? C6H12O6 plus 6O2. As can be seen from the equation for photosynthesis, the wood, bark, and root came from water and carbon dioxide. Here we go. It's talking about the plant growth. Here we go again. So, there's my tool. So then, here's the sun. Light energy, right? Light energy goes down and it hits the light dependent where you need light, okay? Because photosynthesis happens in 2 steps. Step 1, you need the light here with the thylakoids. You see the little stack? What is that stack called again? What is this called? They're thylakoids, look like coins, but they are a granum, remember? And when it's a lot of them, grana. Okay, so the light goes in and hits this, right? And then there's also water there. There's water. And what is water again? What formula? H2O. And look how oxygen is released here. Where did they get the oxygen from? The H2O, guys. So there's water there, and then zap. The sunlight hits the H2O in the thylakoids, okay? And oxygen is released. The H2O is going to continue. See how it says here ATP, NADPH? That goes to the Calvin cycle. Calvin discovered this, okay? So again, water is there in the plant. It needs water. The sun hits the thylakoid and zap. The H2O is zapped by the light, so it needs light, and oxygen is released. And we're going to see this tomorrow in a plant. And then the H2 are little electrons, their energy, ATP, right? And then go to the Calvin cycle. And then with carbon dioxide, that's what they breathe in, right? They produce sugar. And what is the formula again? What do we think of? Chocolate, right? Cho. And what is that scary but interesting number? And here it's 6-12-6. Why? Remember? I don't know if you remember, I went over this in biomolecules with carbohydrates, but it's in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. And all that means is that C and O in carbohydrates, sugars, are always going to equal the same. So if it's 6, then times 2 is going to be 12. Sugars are always going to be like that. Okay? In a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. The same number, C and O, and H is just going to be the double of that. All right. So remember, the Calvin cycle is step 2. Step 2, the Calvin cycle. And does it need light? No, that doesn't need to be in the light when it makes glucose. We won't be able to see that being made, guys. All right. So again, review. Light and water are used And we need this in the light-dependent reactant. Why do we need the light here? What happens? What does the light do? Remember? Zap, right? So light, it needs the sun. Yes? And where does this happen? In the chloroplast. Remember the little chloroplast, little frijolito? Remember these little things? What are these little things called again? Yeah, the stack is called a grana, right? And all of these are grana. But the coin-looking things are called helicoids. All right. And what happens to that H2O? Zap, right? So the oxygen is released. That's over here. And then what keeps going? The electrons, the energy from H2. You see how we're going here? It goes down. And then what happens? Carbon dioxide, right? Also goes in. And independent, what does that mean? Independent. Que no depende, right? It does not depend on the light. So you don't need the light to make the carbohydrates, I'm sorry. So Calvin cycle, right? He's the one that discovered this. And this is another form of CHO. What are those numbers again? 1 and 2 to 1? 6 and 6, and then 12. That's times 2. Very good. All right, so here we go. The big picture. Carbon dioxide plus water, right? Plus light energy make sugars plus oxygen, the glucose, right? Things we need. So CO2, 6 of those, plus H2O, 6 of those, plus light energy. This is what a plant needs. You cannot forget this, guys. This is what plants need. And what do they make? CHO, right? Chocolate or sugar. C6H12O6 and oxygen, 6O2. I'm going to move on because you already have this. And look, there's a plant on top that actually shows you what they use, right? We saw this in the beginning. So, question. Which are the three things plants need to make food? It's here. You can see it on this equation. Write it down. Where does photosynthesis occur in the chloroplast? Where? You know this. There are 2 parts, right? What are the products of photosynthesis? What does it make? Right? What does it end with? So, which are the 3 things plants need to make food? And the answer is sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, right? That's what plants need. Remember that. Where does photosynthesis occur? So, chloroplast, and then you have 2 parts, right? Step 1 is in the thylakoids, right? Does this need light energy or not? Do you need light for this? Yes, remember it's light dependent. It depends on the light because the light, what does it do to the water? Zap, right? And it releases oxygen and it uses the H2 electrons. And then what about part 2? Does that need light? No, that's independent of light. And that happens in the, what was that called again? The stroma. Stroma. Okay, it's not letting me write. In the stroma, right? In the gel-filled inside of the chloroplast. All of this does take place, though, in that little frijolito, the chloroplast. It's green. What are the products of photosynthesis? Glucose and oxygen. Okay, I'm going to have to time out, and I will go ahead and talk about cellular respiration next time.